Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the next episode of StreamTime Sports. My name is Krista. I'm the community lead, joined as always by our CEO, Nick Meacham. Now, Nick, today as we record this, so, we'll pull it up in the video. I'll show everybody. Today is opening day in Cincinnati for Major League Baseball. Those that don't know, it is a holiday back at home. My parents will be attending the game today. I get close to about 200,000 people all in downtown. You can take a look
Wow.
of it. It's great. Everyone loves it. There's a big parade. Cincinnati's absolutely a baseball town. It's a bit unfortunate, Nick. Cincinnati, the Reds, were the first ever professional baseball team until money became more important. Historically, the Cincinnati Reds were always the first game of the Major League Baseball season. It's only been about in the last 5 to 6 years that they've started putting other games on before them, obviously, largely for the broadcasters to have something, because the Reds typically first pitch is around 2 or 3 p.m. It's not necessarily prime time viewing, but it's a very big day in Cincinnati. Um, I'm not sure. I think the Reds won the World Series the year I was born in 1990. They've not won a playoff series since. So a little bit like the Bengals. But you never know. You never know what could happen, Nick. Every season could be different.
It could be. It's a bit difficult at this day and age with the amount of money going into teams like the Yankees and the Dodgers to be able to compete seriously. But I don't know enough about MLB to pretend like I know what I'm talking about. Didn't the Red Sox have a curse for a while? Do the
did.
Reds have a curse?
Well, yes, the Red Sox had the curse from when they traded Babe Ruth, the great Bambino, traded him from the Red Sox to the Yankees. And it was nearly, I think, 100 years before they finally won a World Series. So quite a long time. Nick, actually super interesting about baseball. I came across a tweet. I'll have to send it to you. And I'll put it in the description of this. Basically talking how private equity is ruining sports, which actually makes perfect sense because we're going to talk about private equity a little bit later on. But basically,
and all the positive energy around private equity.
I know.
Not all doom and gloom.
But basically, they were talking about the Fenway Sports Group, who also own Liverpool as well, that it's actually more profitable to be a losing team than a winning team, and went really in depth into basically the business of baseball and basically really kind of like poo-pooed everything. So it's a really great one, Nick. It's about 5-6 minutes long to go through it. So I'll send it to you. I'll put it in the podcast description for everybody else talking about private equity. But the interesting thing, Nick, about baseball is everyone hates on the Dodgers, and I get it. And because they're kind of like the Empire from Star Wars. I saw a statistic. They spend something like 95% of their revenue on player salaries. So basically almost all the money they make, they're putting directly back in. So yes, they're spending heap loads of money. Like even their luxury tax is more than some teams just whole payroll. But they're, like I said, they're almost spending 100% of the revenue. So at least they're going all in. Whereas someone like the Cincinnati Reds and some of these mid-market teams, they're like spending less than 50% of their revenue on player salaries. So I get the argument. Everyone's mad about how much money the Dodgers are spending, but you can at least make the argument they're not actually making a lot of money. Like they're putting almost all of their money from TV deals and sponsorship directly back into the players. So I'd argue as much as people talk about, needing to add a salary cap, there's also an importance in having a salary floor that says, hey, like you have to at least spend X amount of your revenue on player salaries or something. So it's really interesting what's going on in baseball right now, Nick. We won't go into that because that could be a whole conversation in itself, but there's a lot going on with baseball. Private equity's in the mix. It's all over the place.
Well, actually, I do think it leads into really a nice thing to what we're going to be talking about today, because it links with a bit of the I think when you describe it kind of sounds a little bit like what we see in European football, particularly like in the UK, right? Where you've got this amount of spend relative to earnings being such a hotly debated topic. And basically these owners of teams both in Europe, but also indeed like the Dodgers, no doubt, are probably playing this game where they're happy to take losses year on year because the actual value of the club still continues to go up because of the actual multiple relative to revenue is still increasing. So their overall value of the club is going up enough that it justifies losing money year on year. If they keep winning trophies, then the valuation goes up proportionally with it. That's not everyone can play that game, unfortunately, and that's the problem. I do think most of the other leagues in the US have a baseline on spend, don't they? But it's baseline like this is they all have a salary cap and they all have a base they have to spend a minimum of. Is that right?
Yeah, I believe it's just a minimum. It's not necessarily like a ratio percentage of like revenue versus salary, but yes, like the NFL has like a minimum cash spend every year that you have to do. So that's why teams like even like the Miami Dolphins, for those who follow the NFL, I don't know if you've been following this, Nick. I think they've got something like $120 million in dead cap this year because of players they're paying to not be on their team this year, they still technically have to go and spend some money. They can't completely blow it up. So yeah, there is some degree of that. Football finances, whether cap space is real and dead money is real, like that. There's some really interesting stuff in American sports, the way they do salary, and balancing those things out, Nick. Like there could definitely be a whole podcast in that.
Oh, a whole podcast. I think there's people out there that create content endlessly around this stuff, and there's good reason because it is complicated.
Yeah.
And those that find the edge on like a little loophole to get around have been the ones that have been successful quite a lot. It's a
Yeah.
bit like Moneyball in some ways, but purely around the finance side.
Yeah, absolutely. But Nick, talking about this going in the direction we're going to, you had the opportunity to speak to Marc Allera, who is, what is he, the chairman now for SGS, which is the
GSG,
G,
Global Sport
GSG,
Group.
got them backward. Yes, GSG, Global Sports Group, which is part of CVC. I guess, Nick, just to kind of paint the context for those that don't know, I'm sure many of our listeners do know, but CVC work with the likes of Formula One, La Liga, Ligue 1, Volleyball World, Rugby Six Nations. They've been in the game for decades. They're not a new group, but the Global Sports Group is new. Could you perhaps just maybe paint a little bit of a picture, kind of give people a bit of an understanding where we've gone from CVC to GSG and sort of how it fits into that whole group?
Yeah, sure. Well, CVC one of the first movers ever in the private equity space to come into and invest into sports heavily. They did that with in and around F1, and then also with MotoGP, and both were very successful products or propositions that they acquired and then subsequently sold. I think from memory, the reports are that they spent something like $2 billion on F1 at the time, and then they sold it for about $8 billion or many, many years later. And I think, just the deal alone to Liberty Media was something like nearly $5 billion at the time. So they were one of the first movers into basically private equity spending in sports. And CVC generally is one of the biggest investment firms basically in the world, investing in all sorts of different sectors. But they've launched this dedicated, they basically took all of their sports assets and then have lumped them into this global sports group. And that's now this new operating, entity that sits above all of those investments they make, which, the message is that they're looking to make further investments as well, and have recently with the Equine Network, reportedly worth a couple of $100 million, I think 300 million is the report, that they made in the US this year as well. So they are looking to spend more and keep building out this portfolio, I suppose, of sports properties in the organization.
Now, with those investments, they have largely been around, or feels like there's a lot of it around media rights. We just saw media rights constantly going up and up and up. And there were, particularly looking things like La Liga and Ligue 1, particularly investing on the idea that the media rights would continue to go up, and that's where they would invest in. Does that still, you mentioned it last week that there was still optimism that that's going up, where we've talked about there is a bit of a concern, the stagnation with media rights in Europe, that maybe that isn't just, they used to say, oh, you can invest in property because property is always going to go up, Nick, sort of, I think maybe that similar mantra for media rights. But it does seem like there is still a bit of that same optimism, despite maybe what we're seeing a little bit from the European rights perspective.
Well, yeah, I don't want to give it all away, but you definitely hear Mark's view on it in this podcast, which, given they have most of their investments have been linked in some way with media rights value. If you look at Ligue 1 developing the LFP media business, La Liga was directly built around media rights revenues. Volleyball World, they created a dedicated commercial entity and took all of that in-house and launched a OTT platform and have done all the broadcast production internally and acquired other leagues' rights. It's a big focus for them. And I'll give you a little hint. He's pretty bullish about the future of media rights, which obviously goes a little bit against what we have been talking about in some instances. But you'll hear a bit more about his views on that. You'll hear more about his views on that quite shortly. And there's that other thing that you hear a lot of, which is basically either media rights are going to go up or sports is just going to figure it out at some stage. And again, I got a little bit of that from Mark as well. You'll get, again, he'll give more eloquent points than that. But basically that because of sports intrinsic value in society and with fans and audience development and engagement, they're just going to find ways of driving up the monetization to keep it growing at the rate that's needed to make it worth while investing into. And that's obviously a big topic of debate, not only by people like us, who, if those who listen will know my thoughts about that sort of mindset, but also, if that is true, then where is the growth actually going to come from? Because I'd love to know, and I'm sure the rest of us would love to as well, particularly outside of the US, because last time we talked about that there is still a lot of general buoyancy in the US specifically around, I guess, media values and where that's going.
Well, that's the part that's concerning to me, Nick, is that I agree. I believe sports is unique in its ability to bring people together and create a sense of emotion. We talk about AI slop and things like that. Like with sports, the amount of times we talk about this, Nick, like you see comebacks like Hollywood. If you made that in a movie, you wouldn't believe it could actually happen in real life. Sports has that unique ability. That's where private equity scares me a little bit. It's the same thing I mentioned with the Red Sox. There's more money in not winning than there is in winning. That, to your point, it almost takes away a bit of what makes sports sports. And if my personal opinion, if too much private equity becomes involved, if making money becomes the priority over winning, sports may lose a little bit of that shine. And even other things like the, accessibility to sports. This is not a direct stream time thing, but Nick, if you follow in America, it costs like an arm and a leg for your kid to play sports these days, and just like the amount of access to facilities and things like that, that I think are driven by private equity because they're making investment in those sorts of spaces. Yeah, I think it's a double-edged sword. Sports is great, but what makes it great, I think, is not to get too emotional about it, but is that connectivity it has with the fans on a more raw level that I don't think private equity cares about when they're more concerned about, sort of the bottom line.
Ultimately, that is their job, though. The people that run private equity organizations, their responsibility to investors is to build up the investment that they've made and walk away with a profit. And then it's up the sports and the stakeholders that are running sport to balance that. If they're willing to take on investment, then it's up to them to hold that whilst keeping true to the roots of sport. Because you are right. Like, I've been living in this more of lately, with particularly having a couple of young kids. And I think it's not talked about enough, and it's just not valued enough, but that role of grassroots in driving fandom, and driving just interest in sports generally. It does start at such a young age. And if you lose some of that because the focus is just at the professional end, or it's just neglected, or it becomes too cost prohibitive, you are going to lose interest in your properties. And the fact of the matter is, most of these people that are having to make decisions on this sort of stuff, they're not, I don't want to say they don't care about it, but their priorities are not the long term. Their priorities are the short to medium term, because that's what they're going to be judged on. They don't have to, have a 25-year plan in place, because they're not going to be judged on it ultimately. New people will come in and take over responsibility, as will private equity and so forth as well. And those people who are leading the charge there just have to show that they're delivering today and in the next year or two, not 20 years from now. So it's a really tricky conundrum. I think private equity is a little bit of a poison chalice in that instance, although I do think it can provide some value if it's just managed correctly, which we've seen a lot of examples where it hasn't been so far.
And just before we hand things over to your interview, Nick, for those that maybe don't know Mark, maybe just get a little bit of a background, because I shouldn't be surprised for how much money he's responsible for looking after. He's got quite an impressive resume of things that he's done in his career before he even got to CVC.
Yeah, I had a good chat with him off stage, and his background, those can look into it. He had nearly 30 years or so in the telco space in the UK, where he was CEO of BT's consumer business and also LVE. So he's come from a very customer centric background there. He was part of the growth and development of BT Sport and TNT Sports, and what that has become, and was involved with that journey pretty much not from beforehand, but right when it sort of kicked off. So he's got some firsthand insight into how platforms can perform, and negotiating rights deals and those types of things as well. And so he's also had quite a bit of work in private equity linked with some of his other projects. So he's definitely got a quite rounded, that was a set of experiences that would give him a different perspective than I think perhaps someone coming with just a pure sports background. Look, and I think you have to take a step back and go, like, why is the Global Sports Group sort of set up in the first place? And I think that's the bit that we're all trying to get our heads around, because CVC has made some important investments over time. And some would say, look, the official lines out of CVC and indeed GSG here, and it's probably what Mark says, I can't remember the exact wording, but it's to consolidate all their investments, to track everything centrally, to unlock shared expertise and synergies, and to create some separation from CVC. But it's also no doubt, and many will point to this, that this the market is volatile. Some of their investments have performed pretty poorly or have had some major challenges along the way. I asked Mark about those in like Ligue 1 in particular and rugby in particular. So why are they bringing this all together? Is it to basically put together some of the underperforming businesses and hopefully that this new set of assets is going to be more valuable as the sum of all of its parts rather than each on its own? And does it make it easier to invest into one portfolio rather than into each individual sports property if they are looking to divest some of their investments in sports? So there's a lot of question marks as to why this exists. But Mark's background, he's been through it all. Managing, I've done a separate interview in which we'll probably publish through other channels, where he gives us a bit of a look into his background. He's been through all, so nothing's going to phase him, I would say, basically, in terms of managing this, being in this role and having to manage so many different stakeholders, ranging from private equity people through to sports leaders, through to performance experts, you name it. But I think he's got a tricky task at hand to make sure they can ride the wave through and ensure that the Liga, Ligue 1 and rugby somehow correct their path and become valuable to the level they needed to provide the return that they need for investors. Because there's otherwise some might say there's some pretty troubling waters ahead for some of these properties they've invested into.
Well, stay tuned to listen to the interview Nick did with Mark just on the other side of this, and we thank you preemptively for joining us for this episode of Stream Time.
Thank you very much.
All right. Mark, thank you for joining us today. You're chair of the Global Sport Group. Let's talk a little bit more for those that aren't familiar with it, for it's a fairly new organization. Give a bit of a description on what the organization is. Now, for those, most of you should be familiar with the company and organization CVC. Now, this is a dedicated sports investment platform you guys have launched last year. And it brings together a host of CVC's sports investments, ranging from La Liga, Ligue 1, Six Nations, Rugby Championship, Premiership Rugby, WTA Ventures, an IPL cricket team, although I think you've exited from that, Volleyball World, and most recently, Equine Network. It'll be a pop quiz if I missed any later. So very international, very competition-centric as well. And since about 2018, the organization collectively has invested around 1.8 billion into sports and appears to be looking to do a little bit more potentially. So that's a bit of the scene setting, one of the major investors into sports globally. So Mark, welcome. What's the reason CVC decided to create Global Sport Group, a dedicated sports sector or division?
Yeah, I mean, the CVC started the journey in sport almost 20 years ago with Formula One. So they are a blue chip investor, one of the largest private equity organizations on the planet, and brilliant investors. Having worked with them over the last couple of years, I've just seen the quality of the people and the way in which they really think about adding value to investments in all categories, actually. But sport specifically, we're here to talk about sport. I think as an investor, they understand sport really, really well. There's deep expertise there. They've been investing in the sector for many, many years. And as we all know, anyone involved in sport knows it's different to other businesses and different to other industries. And so to be working with an investor that's backing us, that gets sport, the highs, the lows, the ups and downs, and the need to think long term, I think is really important. I think the rationale for why have we created the platform now and not had all these individual investments managed separately, I think really points to the big trends that I see happening in the world and we're all experiencing. We've got a global media market that is changing rapidly. The global streamers coming into sport now. It's a relatively new phenomenon, but already billions of investment from streamers compared to a few years ago. And we certainly see that trend continuing. We see sponsorship and the importance of global sponsorship deals, the importance of data and analytics, the need for sport as an industry to focus more on cost and the cost base is really important. And so when you have a platform and the ability to act as a platform with an aggregate set of leagues to work on both the revenue generating deals, could be media or sponsorship or data aggregation, as well as the cost synergies, I think that is a real advantage for the leagues we have and the ones that we will acquire in the coming years. I think it's going to be a really important trend because the industry is incredibly fragmented and needs to consolidate. And we will be an important part of that consolidation story, not the only one. But if I look at music, video games, TV, media, those IP industries have been through pretty significant consolidation, and sport has not yet. But I believe it will, and therefore a platform like ours will be an important catalyst for that journey.
So, Marc, you've been brought in to chair this new organisation. Now, for those that aren't familiar with Marc's background, Marc, you've been CEO of BT in the UK, one of the biggest broad telecommunications company, also of EE as it changed brands. You helped launch BT Sport, which turned into TNT Sport recently. You were previously at Sega on the gaming side. So a couple of decades, not to age you, there are a couple of decades of experience, give or take, across gaming and telecommunication, and indeed with broadcasting. So what's the remit you've been brought in? Why have you been brought into this organization to lead it? Is it to do with your background, or is it just because it's a new challenge and opportunity for you to get your teeth into?
Well, firstly, unfortunately, it's 3 decades. So
I didn't want to age you too much, but you've done it now.
But so I think the creation of a platform and a business opportunity like this does require new people to come in, and hopefully the experience that I've got across many of these industries can be applied to sport. We've got a fantastic team at GSG, some really, really brilliant executives who have huge, deep expertise in sport and media, and my job really is to harness all of that quality that we have and make sure that we're focusing on adding value to our leagues where we can. We've got really great CEOs of the leagues we have in our portfolio doing an amazing job. But what they can't do at times is act as a collective where that's needed. And that's really how I think about organizing the brilliant team we have at GSG.
So, as I said before at the beginning, a lot of leagues and competitions you've invested into. Why not not teams, but why not teams, and why not say more into the US? Why has it been very international organizations and leagues you've been investing into to this point?
Well, so, I mean, we really like leagues. I always say, particularly when you think of football as an example, I like to sleep at night on a Saturday night, Sunday night, and enjoy the games and look at the results and not worry about whether any of our investments are going to get relegated or miss out on Champions League, or there's huge jeopardy in some sports. And we really do believe in power of leagues, and we can see that so many of the sports we have and some of the other ones we're also looking at premium IP. They've been around for decades. The world at the moment, everyone's obsessing about this infinite content generation we're seeing and the disruption that AI is bringing to pretty much every industry on the planet. If you believe that, I certainly do believe that. But one thing it cannot disrupt or replace is the power of sport. Sport is such a power. It's the most powerful IP on planet Earth. It is the only thing that can unite a country in a particular moment or divide a city. It's the only appointment to view content that anyone will sit and watch in that time, in that moment, whether it's in the stadium, on the sofa, or couch, I should say, or in the pub or a restaurant, where families sit together and watch things at the same time. It's so powerful, and these leagues have been around for decades and will be around for decades to come. And so to have the privilege to work with these IP holders that have such powerful IP in a world where that IP, I believe, will become even more valuable, even more powerful, and help them think through how they can grow it and how they can shape it and evolve it and turn it into something even more special for the next generation to come is a real privilege.
It certainly is. Now, you mentioned about the growth opportunities with the monetization of IP and so forth. We set off at the start of this event today to talk about that a lot of investment has been around a big focus around the growth of commercialization of sports, media rights being a big part of that, and proponent of that. What are some of the other aspects that you see that monetization of IP can be brought to life in a way that drives enough return for making an investment into a league or not?
Well, I believe there's significant change that anyone in the sport industry is going through, and if they're not going through it, they need to go through it, which is how to drive more value from the IP that you have. And because, as we touched on earlier, the media market is changing beyond all recognition in pretty much every market in the world. The sponsorship market will be changing significantly, and we can touch on why. And the importance and the need to have talent in your organization that can understand the consumer of the future, the trends of the future, the need and importance of data and analytics that will power pretty much everything. I mean, anyone that has got an IP that cannot understand their fans and demonstrate to a broadcaster, traditional or streamer, a sponsor or partner, global or local, and understand their fans is going to be in real trouble in the future. And some of that you can't yet see because these contracts are multi-year contracts, and you know, many teams or leagues may be in them, and therefore you can't see what's coming. But what we really do believe is working with our assets to ensure that they really do understand the importance of data and analytics, understanding your fan, because that's how you will drive and demonstrate value to your streamers, to your sponsors, to your partners. And in a much more crowded media market, it's crowded enough today, and it will get even more crowded with AI being able to generate more content, and consumers have only got 24 hours in the day. The need to understand them and deliver great content and partnerships and content that's relevant to them is going to be hugely important. And so that's how we really think about this, understanding the fan and obsessing about the fan and the fan's experience. But all of that is powered by really important platforms of data that in many organizations, still not spending enough time thinking about that we see in some of the conversations we have.
Some of the relationships that CVC, now GSG, have, they look quite different in their construct from what I've seen and reported. You talk about some relationships are very much built around the media side of the business explicitly, launching a new commercial media arm. I'm thinking Ligue 1. I'm thinking also La Liga's deal was reportedly around the media rights growth projected for the organization. Then there's more loans potentially against future revenues. Then you've got new commercial arms of like Volleyball World, which were launched to manage all of their different assets, events, and so forth. I think many of them have, some of them are controlling, some of them are minor investments into those organizations. So it seems to have evolved over the last few years. What is the ideal playbook or approach you have now that you're looking for, talking to a league about how you would invest?
You've touched on many examples of the great leagues we have, and they are all slightly different. That is part of the rationale of the platform, actually, because that whilst they're different sports, there are many commonalities between them all, and they can all learn from each other. And what GSG really helps with is helping all of these different leagues learn from each other. And there are examples of excellence that we see in so many different areas. You've touched on some there, where we can get those learnings to the other leagues and help them get better as well. In terms of what we look for, we look for premium IP. We look for leagues and sports that have been around for decades, where there is an opportunity to partner with a management team that gets how the future of sport and media and sponsorship and data is evolving and wants to work with us on that journey. And we can bring capital backed by the best PE investor in sport in the world, and some expertise that we can bring from management and executives at a GSG level and bring that together, the capital and the expertise, and of course the learnings over almost 20 years of investing in sport across many different sports to drive more value for them and help them touch more fans and improve the fan experience and build their IP to be even stronger than it is today.
Given the different leagues and properties you have within GSG, how would you state or summarize the performance of the portfolio today versus what is needed to make it deliver the returns that you're looking for?
I think it's performing very well. Every league we have has a great plan. We've got great executives running them. They're all operating in different markets and different sports with different situations. And we also know there's more value to bring both at a league and a GSG level, like any business, whether it's in sport or in any category. You're never done. There's always improvements you can make in how you drive the business and how you take it forward. But we take a long-term view. We work with these brilliant management teams and good performance so far, but many opportunities ahead because these tailwinds that we see in sport are pretty significant. You've got the growth in women's sport. You've got the power that data and analytics can bring. You've got a changing media market, which is bringing stronger, well-funded new partners into the marketplace. You've got close to 1 billion people on planet Earth who still don't yet have a powerful smartphone and a powerful network to engage with their favorite content on. So everywhere you look, there are many tailwinds coming for sport. And it's great to be working with them on these opportunities as well.
So you have a number of investments in European football, which I alluded to earlier, particularly in the Liga and Ligue 1. Ligue 1 has had a tricky ride in terms of some of the things that happened along the way with regards to its media rights deals and having to go direct to consumer and launch a platform, which I referenced earlier in the presentation I did today. That seems like it's had a pretty rough journey. How do you see that coming through? Obviously, it's launched this new platform. It's getting subscriptions and so forth, which we've seen covered in the media. But there's a big gap between what the expectations were on media rights revenues and what's being generated from the OTT platform that was created and launched. How do you see that playing out?
Well, firstly, we take a long-term view. We don't expect the results to come through overnight when you're undergoing such a significant change as the team, the Ligue 1 team in France are doing. I mean, they've launched a direct-to-consumer product for the most popular sport on the planet, which is football in their home country, partnered with some other great distribution channels as well, and achieved well over 1 million subscribers in their first season, and most of those came in the first few weeks of the new season, which I think is an incredible achievement. And not just our leagues in the GSG portfolio, but many other leagues are now watching with real interest as to how that product is performing, and going back to data and analytics and the importance of understanding your fan and your customer. I think it's a really interesting case study in terms of a potential distribution model that can work. And I must stress, it's not only D2C; it also is carried by local telcos and Amazon and so on. I think the second season they'll be gearing up for that, and we'll see how it goes. But I think it's off to a good start. As you say, it came through a period of adversity, but sometimes adversity creates more creativity, better ideas, bolder ideas and strategies for dealing with them, and that's what we're seeing from that team. As I said before, we can take a long-term view on this, and because we have a portfolio, we have a lot of learnings. We've been in the market for 20 years. We'll be in the market for the long term as well. So we recognise that at times you have these moments, and you've got to ride them and deal with them and support the teams to get through them.
You've talked a lot about data and the importance of understanding audiences and turning that into a value for the organisation. Given most major organizations across the US and indeed in Europe, that media rights focus is where the lion's share of revenue does come from. Sponsorship does play obviously a meaningful role in other sectors as well. Given the volatility and the fragility of what can happen like a league, and do you think it needs there needs to be a recalibration of focus on growing other areas of revenue more than. My theory is when we talk about data is that can lead to incremental gains, but can it be a needle mover to really ramp up revenues in legal property if media rights starts to become a challenge?
I'm confident that the media rights landscape over the long term is still incredibly healthy, and arguably even more healthy with global streamers coming in, and they of course have recognized the power that sport has. They with the portfolios of all the content they have, whether it's film or TV, nothing can bring audiences at the scale that they have with a point of view that is compelling, that fans will tune in, week out to support their team or their nation. Nothing will do that. So you've got incremental, incredibly well-funded platforms adding to the media landscape, which I think is a tailwind for the long term. But I do believe that the opportunities to grow revenue beyond media do exist, and what we work on with our leagues and any other leagues out there should be thinking about this is, in order to do that, the understanding of the fan and the infrastructure you need to put in place to monetize those opportunities is an incredibly important thing.
What are some of those examples? Is it around sponsorship? You thinking that's the main, digital sponsorship is going to be the main revenue driver? Any other areas that come to mind that will be a needle mover from that perspective?
Well, gaming is a really important one. So gaming, gambling, however you want to talk to that. And that obviously this country is opening up more and more states as you go. The power of data that powers all of that, incredibly important. Fantasy and the link to video games is also an important revenue opportunity as well as an engagement driver of regular usage and the ability to understand that fan even more. And as you say, the sponsorship and partnership opportunities, they expand if you've got great data and understanding of your consumer as well.
So one of the major moves you've made recently was an investment into the Equine Network, which is, from what the reports are, a controlling stake, deals valued at $300 million, which it sounds like a lot of money. So it must be a lot in that. You've got competitions, you've got OTT platforms, you've got a very vertically integrated organization by the sounds of it. Why Equine Network?
Well,
all those reasons I basically said.
Yeah, I mean, you've listed some of the reasons. It's a fantastic business. Gives us a bit more exposure to the US as well. Incredibly passionate group of participants and spectators in that, and a business with a different revenue profile, which adds to our diversification story as well, which is important for the platform. That has less reliance on media, as an example, and sponsorship, although they also remain opportunities. So we love it. It's premium IP. It's in America. It's a huge market. There's big tailwinds behind it. There's a lot of opportunities that the team are working on there. We really like the business.
So you've made a move into a more of a legitimate, serious move into the US and started to make waves here. And you talked a bit earlier about the idea of investing more into more leagues and competitions. What is that the brief? Is it to basically manage those existing properties and look to invest more?
Yeah, my focus and the team's focus is help our leagues where we can make them better. We've got great teams doing a fantastic job, but we recognize there are opportunities at a platform level in some of these bigger deals and a consolidating landscape that's becoming more global, and that's where a platform approach can help to revenue and cost. And we are always looking out for other great leagues that we can add to the GSG platform as well, and we're in conversation with many, and we continue to get a lot of interest because I think people are realizing now the need for the scale that we can bring, mm-hmm. and the benefits that can bring to them as a league, and not just the capital that we can bring, but I think most importantly the knowledge and expertise and case studies and learnings across the portfolio that we can bring that can accelerate any league's journey to building more value.
Private equity's role in sports is an interesting one. One of the most successful stories of private equity in sport was Formula One, was the CVC story that you mentioned earlier, sort of kicked off CVC's role there. Some people across the industry do question its place in driving the value that we've been talking about. What's your thoughts on just how institutional investment is performing currently across the wider industry?
Well, as I said, our philosophy and approach is this is not just about capital. You've got to work with management teams to build a plan and a strategy together that you can believe in, that is investable, and bring knowledge and expertise and the right people to lead these organizations and their first line. I think the talent agenda is a hugely important one. You know, everyone fixates on the money and the headline checks, but really, you know, when that bit's done, the hard work really starts, which is leading, managing, picking the strategic choices you needed to make, driving the change that's needed, because often there's a need for the investment, which is, you know, an opportunity's there and needs to be unlocked, and to unlock that you need great people who can then work at pace with that investment and backing to drive it. And again, with a portfolio approach, we've got so many case studies of ideas and opportunities that have worked or not worked or are still on the slate, and learnings that we can spread quickly across the portfolio to all the leagues we have, plus the new ones that will come into the platform. And that's how we really think about it.
One of the major sports you invested into a number of years ago was rugby, with a number of investments. You recently made an announcement with Premiership Rugby and a restructure to make more of a franchise approach. Can you just talk us through what that change was exactly and why you've done it?
Well, I think rugby's in a really great position now. Prem Rugby. This is the UK's rugby league proposition, and very recently there's been the support to turn it into a more of a franchise style league, where new clubs can join, as long as we have confidence in the standards being met across many metrics. But as a league, it's performing brilliantly. I mean, it's a sport now. Its audience figures are up hugely, in the multiple tens of % in terms of engagement with our broadcast partner. Audience in the stadiums increasing significantly, and the team there are doing a really fantastic job in improving that product. And the fans are really recognising that and feeling that.
So Premiership Rugby and indeed rugby, in particularly in the UK, went through a bit of a rocky period there after there was investment was brought in. Did you feel like was it felt at CVC and indeed GSG now that was badly managed by the people who received that investment? It felt like you guys gave them a lot of opportunity with making that investment, and it didn't quite go and play out the way many hoped it would initially, and now it seems to be sort of correcting itself since.
Well, I think the team had to deal with COVID and the pandemic, and that was really the unfortunate bit about the timing, which no one could have predicted and dealt with. And as we now come, and that was in and around the time that the investment was made. So, and again, this is the benefit of taking a long-term perspective with an organization like CVC that takes a long-term perspective and supports management teams for the long term in all kinds of situations. And so what we're seeing now in a more stable world, the product is now really shining through, as the plans are starting to come to fruition. And some of these things, the move to the league and the restructures, these take real time and effort and energy, but we're really starting to see that now.
Final question I'll ask is, came in through the audience, was just about your focus on North America. Now, you made the move into the equine, the investment into the equine network. You've got this portfolio of different properties across international or indeed across Europe. Does it point to a slightly different approach that you're looking to take to North America, or is it just a case-by-case basis you're looking at investments?
I think it's case by case. We've got a platform that's got a great diversification story in terms of the sports we have, the geographies we're in, the revenue streams that we participate in, and obviously North America and it's a huge and important market. And if we can find the right situation, we'd love to invest in other opportunities here. And we're always interested in them, but we're also interested in opportunities in Europe and Asia and anywhere that's got premium IP with a great team that wants to partner with us on the journey and needs investment and expertise to drive further value. They're the conversations we like having.
Good stuff. Well, Marc, thank you for sharing a little bit of insight into GSG and the approach, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.